Picture this. You're standing in a chamber that hasn't seen living feet in 1,000 years. The air is thick with dust that tastes like death. And in front of you, sitting on a throne of bones, is something that was once human. Its eyes burn with cold fire. Its skeletal hands rest on the arms of the throne, each finger adorned with rings that cost kingdom. And when it speaks, its voice sounds like pages turning in a book that should have been burned centuries ago. This is a lich, and after 50 years of Dungeons and Dragons, it remains the single most terrifying thing you can put in front of a party. But here's the thing, liches weren't always like this. When the Lich first appeared in 1975, it was barely more than a skeleton in a robe. No phylactery, no grand rituals, no tragic backstory, just a really scary wizard that refused to die. So how did we get from that to this? That's what we're exploring today. The complete history of the Lich, from its first appearance to its current incarnation. Every edition, every change, every legendary Lich that's terrorized players for half a century. Let's begin. Alright. Before we dive into history, let's establish what we're actually talking about. A Lich, at its core, is an undead spellcaster who has achieved immortality through dark magic. But that definition, while accurate, doesn't really capture what makes a Lich so terrifying. See, the Lich isn't like a vampire that got cursed, or a zombie that got raised. A Lich chose this. A Lich looked at death, said, "No thank you," and then did something so profoundly evil that death itself couldn't claim them. And then there's the phylactery. If you've encountered a Lich in D&D, you know about phylacteries. It's the Lich soul container, the anchor that keeps them bound to the mortal world. Destroy the Lich's body, and it reforms. Destroy the phylactery? Now you've got a problem. But here's something interesting, and we'll explore this in depth later. The phylactery wasn't always part of the Lich concept. It evolved over time, added through play and iteration. The Lich also stands apart from other undead in one crucial way: intelligence. This isn't a shambling corpse following orders. This is a genius who has had centuries, sometimes millennia, to plan, scheme, and accumulate power. A vampire might rule a city. A Lich builds empires that outlast civilization. So that's what we're tracking today. How did this creature evolve from a simple monster listing into the complex, terrifying villain we know today? We're going to trace the Lich through original D&D and first edition, where it all began. Then second edition, where Liches got deep and personal. Third edition, where the Lich exploded into dozens of variants. Fourth edition, where? Well, we'll talk about fourth edition and fifth edition, where the modern Lich found its final form. Along the way, we'll meet the legendary Liches, Vecna, Akarerak, Sastam, and explore what makes each of them iconic. Ready? Let's go back to the very beginning, and I mean before D&D was even created. The word lich is old, really old. We're talking Old English, around the 9th century. The word lich simply meant body or corpse, and for centuries, that's all it meant. You might have heard of a lich gate, that covered gateway at the entrance to Old English churchyards. That's where pallbearers would wait with the body, the lich, before burial. Lich yards were cemeteries. The lich wake was the vigil kept over a corpse. Nothing supernatural about any of this, just a word for a dead body. So, how did we get from corpse to immortal undead wizard? That's where fantasy literature comes in, and there are a few key influences we need to talk about. First, Clark Ashton Smith. If you haven't read Smith, you should. He was writing alongside Lovecraft and Howard in the weird fiction magazines of the 1930 seconds, and his imagination was dark. In 1932, Smith published a story called The Empire of the Necromancers. In it, two wizards raise an entire dead civilization from the grave, ruling over a kingdom of the intelligent undead. These undead remember their lives. They have their old personalities. They resent their masters. Now, Smith didn't call them liches, but the DNA is there. Undead magic users with intelligence and will, created through dark magic. Second, and this is a big one, Koschei the Deathless. If you're not familiar with Slavic folklore, Koschei is a fascinating figure. He's an evil, immortal sorcerer who can't be killed by conventional means because his soul is hidden away in a needle inside an egg inside a duck, inside a hare, inside an iron chest, buried under an oak tree on an island. Sound familiar? That layered protection, that hidden soul, that's the phylactery concept. The idea that an evil wizard could hide their vital essence in an external object, making them impossible to truly kill. This is ancient folklore. We're talking stories that are centuries old, and they would directly influence what Gary Gygax created. Third, Egypt. The whole concept of mummification, of preserving the body so the soul has a vessel to return to, runs parallel to Lich mythology, a pharaoh preparing for eternity, surrounded by treasures, protected by traps and curses. When you walk into a Lich's lair, you're walking into a corrupted version of a pharaoh's tomb. The iconography is intentional. Now, Gary Gygax was a voracious reader. He consumed fantasy literature, folklore, mythology, everything he could get his hands on. And when he sat down to create monsters for this new game called Dungeons & Dragons, all of these influences were swirling in his head. The Lich was about to be born. The year is 1975. Dungeons & Dragons has been out for just 1 year, and already players are demanding more. More classes, more monsters, more stuff. So Gary Gygax releases Supplement 1, Greyhawk. And buried in its pages, almost as an afterthought, is the first appearance of the Lich. Let me tell you about the original description, and I want you to appreciate just how sparse this is. The Greyhawk Lich was described as essentially a skeletal magic user. Very high level, very powerful. That's pretty much it. No phylactery, no ritual, no explanation for how they became this way. Just, here's a really scary dead wizard. Good luck. And honestly, that was fine for 1,975. The game was new. Everyone was making it up as they went along. The Lich was just another monster to throw at players who had gotten too powerful. But here's what's interesting. Even in this basic form, the Lich captured something. Players were terrified of Liches, not because of detailed lore or complex mechanics, but because of what the Lich implied. This was a wizard so powerful, so evil, so determined that death itself couldn't stop them. That core concept, that existential dread, was there from day one. Then came 1st edition, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and everything changed. The Monster Manual dropped in 1977, and suddenly the Lich got a real write-up. Let me walk you through what we learned. First, motivation. The 1st edition Monster Manual tells us that Liches are formerly combative magic, users of genius intelligence who have become undead through certain malevolent magical means. They seek to increase their own power, acquire magical items, and gain revenge upon those who offended them in their former existence. That's a character. That's not just a monster, that's a villain with goals. Second, the Lich got powers. Paralyzing touch, fear aura, high-level spellcasting, magic resistance. These weren't just tough monsters, they were unfair. And that was the point. You weren't supposed to fight a Lich fair, you were supposed to be scared of a Lich. Third, and this is important, the 1st edition Monster Manual introduces the phylactery concept, but in very vague terms. It mentions that the Lich's spirit is bound to the material plane through certain foul magical objects, and that destroying these objects is the only way to truly kill the Lich. But no details, no mechanics, no ritual. That was left to the DMs to figure out, and figure it out they did. Let's talk about Tomb of Horror. In 1978, Gary Gygax published what might be the most infamous D&D adventure ever written, and at the heart of it was Asararak, a Lich so powerful he had transcended even Lichdom to become something else. We'll talk about Asararak in depth later, but for now, understand this. Tomb of Horrors showed players what a Lich could really be. Not just a powerful monster, but a malevolent intelligence that had spent centuries designing a death trap. The dungeon itself was the Lich's weapon. Every trap, every trick, every false ending, all designed by an undead genius with nothing but time. And then there's Vecna. Vecna first appears in 1st edition lore, though his full story would develop over time. But even in these early days, players knew the name. The Hand of Vecna, the Eye of Vecna. Artifacts of incredible power, taken from a Lich who had somehow become even more than a Lich. Vecna represented the ceiling. If a Lich accumulated enough power, enough time, enough followers, what could they become? By the end of first edition, the Lich had established itself as D&D's ultimate arcane villain, but the lore was still sparse. We knew what a Lich was, but not really how they came to be. That would change dramatically in second edition. Second edition, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons launched in 1989, and it brought a new philosophy to monster design: ecology. TSR realized that players wanted more than stat blocks. They wanted to understand how these creatures lived, thought, and fit into the world, and no monster benefited more from this approach than the Lich. The second edition Monstrous Compendium gave us our first detailed look at Lich society, or rather, the lack of it. Liches are solitary by nature, we learned. They don't trust other Liches. They don't form alliances. Each one is convinced that they're the smartest, most powerful being in existence. Which, let's be honest, is probably what you'd expect from someone arrogant enough to think they deserved immortality. We also got concrete requirements. In second edition, you had to be at least an 18th level wizard to become a Lich. That's not just high level, that's legendary. That's can reshape reality with a thought level. The implication was clear. Lichdom wasn't for amateurs. Only the greatest wizards could even attempt it. But the real revolution came from an unexpected source: Ravenloft. For those unfamiliar, Ravenloft is D&D's horror setting, a demi-plane of dread where dark lords rule over cursed domains, unable to ever leave, tormented by their own evil. And Ravenloft loved Liches. Meet Azalin Rex, the Lich King of Darkon. Azalin was a wizard in life, brilliant, ruthless, and obsessed with power. He became a Lich to escape death. And then the dark powers of Ravenloft claimed him. Now Azalin rules an entire domain. He has everything a Lich could want: power, territory, endless time, and he's miserable. See, Azalin is cursed. He can't learn new magic. Every spell he knew when he became a Lich is all he'll ever have. For a wizard who defined himself by his pursuit of knowledge, it's a fate worse than death. This is what Ravenloft did to the Lich. It made them tragic. And then came the book that changed everything: Van Richten's Guide to the Lich. Published in 1993, this is the definitive Lich sourcebook. Nothing before or since has matched it for detail, creativity, and sheer gothic horror. Let me walk you through what it gave us. First, the complete ritual. For the first time, we got a detailed description of how someone becomes a Lich. The potion, the phylactery construction, the moment of death, the binding of the soul, every step laid out in horrifying detail. The ritual requires months or years of preparation, rare and vile components, a potion that must be drunk at the moment of death, a phylactery crafted to specific arcane requirements, and usually a sacrifice or series of sacrifices. Van Richten's Guide makes clear: you don't stumble into lichdom, you earn it through deliberate evil. Second, the phylactery got real. We learned that a phylactery isn't just any container. It has to be made of specific materials. It has to be enchanted with specific spells. And it has to contain a piece of the future Lich's soul. The book also introduced the concept that destroying a phylactery is hard. It's not just HP damage, it requires specific methods, often unique to each phylactery. Third, the psychology of lichdom. Van Richten's Guide explores what happens to someone who becomes a Lich, not just physically, but mentally. The slow erosion of humanity, the obsessive focus on goals, the inability to connect with living beings. The book makes a fascinating point. Most Liches don't realize how much they've changed. They remember being human, they remember caring about things, they just don't anymore. It's like a gradual numbing. The Lich doesn't become evil all at once, they just stop being able to feel anything else. Fourth, Lich variants. Van Richten's Guide introduced or formalized several types of Liches. The Archlich. Good aligned Liches who underwent the transformation for noble reasons. They're rare, and the process is slightly different, but they prove that Lichdom isn't inherently evil, just usually. The Belnorn. Elven Liches who serve their families and communities after death. They're protectors and guardians, not conquerors. This was a fascinating addition, suggesting that different cultures might approach undeath differently. The Demolich. This one's important. A Demolich is what happens when a Lich's body completely decays, leaving only the skull. But the Demolich isn't weaker, it's stronger. Its soul is more concentrated, its power more focused. The Demi-Lich is the Lich taken to its logical extreme. And then there's the Dracolich. The Cult of the Dragon, in Forgotten Realms lore, believes that undead dragons will rule the world. So, they help dragons become liches. Think about that for a moment. A dragon's intelligence, a dragon's power, combined with a lich's immortality and arcane knowledge. The Dracolich is one of the most terrifying creatures in D&D, and it came out of 2nd edition's expansion of Lich lore. By the end of 2nd edition, the Lich had transformed from a simple monster into a complex villain archetype. You could run entire campaigns around a single Lich. You could create tragic backstories, complex motivations, and morally gray situations. The Lich wasn't just scary anymore. It was interesting. 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons launched in 2000 with a revolutionary concept, the template. Templates allowed you to add creature types on top of existing creatures. Want a vampire orc? Apply the vampire template. Want a half-dragon kobold? Apply the half-dragon template. And want a lich? Well, now anyone could become one. In 3rd edition, the Lich became a template that could be applied to any spellcaster, not just wizards, sorcerers, clerics, even bards if they met the requirements. This was huge. Suddenly, the Lich wasn't limited to a specific archetype. A death cleric could become a Lich to serve their god eternally. A sorcerer with dragon blood could seek undeath to continue their bloodline's legacy. The concept exploded. The requirements were also formalized into game mechanics. Caster level 11th or higher, lower than 2nd edition. The craft wondrous item feat, 120,000 gold pieces in materials. And, of course, evil alignment. Wait, 120,000 gold pieces? For immortality? That's actually kind of a bargain when you think about it. But 3rd edition's real contribution came in 2004 with Libris Mortis, the Book of the Dead. If Van Richten's Guide was the definitive 2nd edition Lich book, Libris Mortis was its 3rd edition successor, and it went deep. First, multiple paths to lichdom. Libris Mortis acknowledged that there's more than one way to become a lich. Different cultures, different magical traditions, different rituals. The book provided several variants. The classic arcane ritual, divine lichdom for evil clerics, pact-based lichdom through deals with dark powers, and even accidental lichdom for those who dabbled too deep. Second, detailed crafting rules. Want to make your phylactery? Here's exactly how. The book provided step-by-step instructions, material requirements, skill checks, and potential complication. It even discussed what happens if something goes wrong. Spoiler, it's bad. Third, the variants multiplied exponentially. Let me run through some of the Lich types that existed by the end of 3.5. Good Lich, also known as Archlich or Bale Norn, formalized and expanded. Dry Lich, a desert variant, preserved by arid conditions. Alhun, Mind Flayer Liches, created by Illithids who reject the Elder Brain. Illithilich, different from Alhuns, these are Mind Flayers who go through the traditional Lich ritual. Dracolich, expanded with full rules. Demi-Lich, given mechanical treatment. Lich Lord, epic level liches of incredible power. Lich Fiend, demon or devil liches. Vasalich, liches created and controlled by others. Master Lich, a template for even more powerful liches. Fourth, Lich ecology became a science. Libris Mortis explored how liches feed their phylacteries, souls, this was formalized here, how lich lairs develop over time, lich minion hierarchies, inter-lich politics, rare but fascinating, what liches do with all that time. The book made the point that liches don't just sit in dungeons waiting for adventurers. They have projects, research, goals that span centuries. Speaking of centuries, the Epic Level Handbook introduced Epic Liches. What happens when a Lich reaches 20th level and keeps going? They become something beyond mortal comprehension. Epic Liches have abilities that break the rules of magic. They've had so long to prepare that fighting them is like fighting a force of nature. By 3.5, the Lich ecosystem was complete. You had CR 11 starting Liches, CR 15 to 18 established Liches, CR 20 plus ancient Liches, and CR 25 to 30 epic Liches, an entire power ladder for DMs to use. Here's the controversial part. 3rd edition made Lichdom accessible. With the rules this clear, players started asking an obvious question. Can my character become a Lich? And the answer was yes, maybe, The template existed, the rules existed. If your character met the requirements and was willing to become evil, you could theoretically become a Lich. This was polarizing. Some groups loved it, the ultimate character arc, the fall to darkness. Others hated it. Liches should be NPCs, villains, not player characters. The debate continues to this day. But while 3rd edition was expanding and codifying, the next edition was about to take a very different approach. Let's talk about 4th edition. Look, I'm not here to relitigate the edition wars. 4th edition made design choices that some people loved and others hated. That's fine. Different games for different folks. But when it comes to Liches specifically, 4th edition made some choices. First, the good. 4th edition Liches were terrifying in combat. The game redesigned monsters around roles, controllers, soldiers, brutes, artillery. The Lich was a solo controller, meaning it was designed to fight an entire party by itself, and it could. 4th edition Liches had interrupt abilities that punished players for acting, auras that weakened anyone nearby, rechargeable powers that made every round dangerous, and a genuinely interesting second wind mechanic. Fighting a 4E Lich was tactical. It moved around the battlefield, it controlled zones, it made you make hard choices about positioning. From a pure game design perspective, pretty good. But then there's the lore. 4th edition simplified things. The detailed ritual? Gone. The phylactery mechanics? Streamlined. The psychology and ecology? Reduced to a paragraph. And here's what really upset people. The Lich vestige. In 4th edition, if you destroyed a Lich's phylactery, but not the Lich itself, it became a Lich vestige, a weakened, desperate creature slowly fading from existence. On paper, this is cool. The idea of a Lich losing its immortality and facing true death for the first time in centuries is genuinely horrifying. In practice, many players felt it cheapened the Lich. The phylactery hunt, that classic D and D quest to find and destroy the hidden soul container, lost its punch when the Lich would just become weaker instead of unkillable. The fan reaction was mixed. Some said, "This isn't a Lich, it's a video game boss." Others said, "Where's the ritual? Where's the horror?" And still others said, "My players will never fear this thing." But there were also voices saying, "Finally, a Lich I can actually run in combat." And "The vestige mechanic is brilliant." And "This feels dangerous." The truth is, 4th edition optimized for one thing while sacrificing another. What 4E kept? The Lich as ultimate arcane threat, high-stakes combat encounters, cool tactical gameplay. What 4E lost? The gothic horror atmosphere, the detailed process of creation, the earned feeling that made liches special. 4th edition's Lich wasn't bad. It just wasn't what many players wanted. And when 5th edition came along, it had a question to answer. What should a Lich be? 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons launched in 2014, and it had a clear mission. Bring players back, unify the fan base, take what worked from every previous edition. For the Lich, that meant threading a very careful needle. The 5th edition Lich is, in my opinion, the best version of the creature we've ever gotten. Let me explain why. First, it's powerful. CR21 puts the Lich in the campaign ending threat tier. This isn't something you fight at level 5. This is something you fight at level 15 plus, and you might still lose. The 5E Lich has 9th level spell slots, legendary actions, meaning it acts on your turn too, legendary resistances, meaning it can just say no to your spells, paralyzing touch, a frightening gaze, and that cold, calculating intelligence. But here's what 5E really nailed: the feel. Read the Lich's description in the 5E monster manual. It doesn't just tell you stats, it tells you a story. Liches are the remains of great wizards who embrace undeath as a means of preserving themselves. They further their own power at any cost, having no interest in the affairs of the living except where those affairs interfere with their own. This is the horror talking, not game mechanics. Horror. Second, the phylactery is scary again. In 5th edition, the phylactery isn't just a container, it's a hunger. The Lich must feed souls to its phylactery, not just once, when it's created, continuously. If a Lich goes too long without feeding, it begins to physically deteriorate. And here's the brilliant part. If a lich fails to feed its phylactery for long enough, it doesn't just die, it demotes. It becomes a demolich. Remember I mentioned demoliches earlier? In 5e, they're what happens when a lich either transcends mortality entirely or fails to maintain their phylactery. The demolich in 5e is a floating skull with jeweled eyes, and it's terrifying. CR 18, trap soul ability, immune to almost everything. So you've got this dynamic. The lich is dangerous, but it's also desperate. It needs souls. It needs to keep feeding. If it doesn't, it becomes something arguably worse. Third, the dark bargain is emphasized. 5th edition makes clear that becoming a lich requires making a deal with what? Demon lords, archdevils, ancient evils beyond naming, entities that will eventually come to collect. A lich isn't just a wizard who found a spell. A lich is someone who traded something precious, their soul, their humanity, their future, for power now. And that bill always comes due. Speaking of dark bargains, let's talk about Vecna in 5th edition. Vecna has been in 5e from the beginning. The Hand and Eye appear in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but recent adventures have brought him to the forefront. Vecna, Eve of Ruin, released recently, positions Vecna as a multiversal threat. He's not just a lich anymore, he's a god, but his origins as a lich are central to his identity. Vecna represents the ultimate arc of lichdom, from mortal wizard to lich to demigod to full deity. He's what happens when a lich's ambition has no ceiling. The 2024 rules revision has also tweaked the lich slightly, though the core concept remains identical. The lich is a pinnacle threat, a campaign villain, a horror of ambition and evil. Looking back across 50 years, each edition gave us something different. Original D and D gave us the skeleton wizard. 1st edition gave us a powerful undead with a vaguely defined phylactery. 2nd edition gave us the gothic horror villain with psychology. 3rd edition gave us a template creature with many variants. 4th edition gave us a tactical solo monster. And 5th edition brought it all together. The horror, the mechanics, and the dark bargains that make lichdom meaningful. 5th edition found the balance. Mechanical threat, psychological horror, narrative, weight. It's all there. Alright, let's take a deep dive on the defining feature of the lich. The phylactery. Because this concept has evolved more than almost any other aspect of lich lore, and understanding that evolution tells us a lot about how D&D thinks about horror and immortality. First, the word itself. Phylactery comes from Greek phylacterion, meaning an amulet or charm, but it's also the English word for tefillin, the small leather boxes containing Torah passages that Jewish men wear during prayer. This has caused some controversy over the years. Using a real-world religious term for an evil artifact bothers some people, and understandably so. Some tables use alternative terms like soul vessel or anchor, but let's trace how the concept developed. In 1st edition, 1977, the phylactery is mentioned, but barely defined. We know the lich has one, we know destroying it is important. That's about it. DMs had to improvise. Some made phylacteries into simple boxes, others created elaborate containers. The lack of rules meant every lich was different. In 2nd edition, 1989 to 1999, Van Richten's guide gave us the works. The phylactery must be crafted during the lich creation ritual. It must be made of specific materials, often precious metals and gem. It must be enchanted with specific spells, and it must contain a piece of the wizard's soul, separated during the moment of death. The book also established that phylacteries are hard to destroy. Not just more hit points hard, specifically hard. Maybe it can only be destroyed by dragonfire. Maybe it must be taken to a specific location. Maybe it can only be broken by someone who loved the lich in life. In 3rd edition, 2000 to 2008, everything got codified. Creating a phylactery requires the craft wondrous item feat, specific spells like magic jar, among others depending on source, materials worth 120,000 gold pieces, and successful skill checks. The rules also establish that a phylactery has hardness 20 and 40 hit points, or specific destruction requirements at DM discretion. In 4th edition, 2008 to 2014, the phylactery became simpler. It existed, it was important, but the mechanical depth was reduced. The focus shifted to what happened when it was destroyed, the Lich vestige. In 5th edition, 2014 to present, the phylactery returned to prominence with a brilliant addition, the feeding mechanic. Let me share the exact concept. A Lich must periodically feed souls to its phylactery to sustain the magic that maintains its body and soul. It does this using the imprisonment spell. A Lich that fails or refuses to maintain its body with sacrificed souls begins to physically fall apart and might eventually become a demolich. This changes everything. In earlier editions, a phylactery was a passive container. Set it and forget it. Hide it well and you're immortal forever. In 5e, the phylactery is a burden. The Lich must constantly hunt for souls. It must capture and imprison living beings. It must maintain a steady supply of sacrifices or face destruction. This makes the Lich scarier. A Lich isn't just sitting in a dungeon, it's hunting. It has needs. It has desperation. That nearby town, the Lich might see it as a pantry. Let's talk about some famous phylacteries from D&D lore. Vecna's Eye and Hand. These artifacts are, in some interpretations, phylacteries of a sort. They contain portions of Vecna's power and serve as anchors for his continued existence. Though Vecna has transcended traditional lichdom, these items remain his connection to the mortal world. Asurarac's skull. Asurarak is a demolich, meaning his phylactery is essentially his own jeweled skull. The gems in his eye, sockets, and teeth contain trapped souls, feeding his existence. In many campaigns, DMs create unique phylacteries. A Lich whose phylactery is a living serpent that must never die. A phylactery that's hidden inside a volcano, one that's buried in the heart of an enemy kingdom. The phylactery is a story hook. Where is it hidden? How do you destroy it? What happens when you do? For DMs running Lich encounters, the phylactery is your greatest tool. Make it meaningful. Don't just put it in a chest. Put it somewhere that requires its own adventure. Make it personal. What does the phylactery say about the Lich? A golden crown suggests arrogance. A children's toy suggests tragedy. A weapon suggests violence. Make it dangerous. The Lich knows where it is. The Lich has defenses around it. Getting to the phylactery should be harder than fighting the Lich itself. For players facing Liches, remember, killing the Lich is just the first step. If you don't find the phylactery, everything you did is temporary. We've talked around this, but let's address it directly. How does someone actually become a Lich? Because the answer has changed over 50 years, and those changes tell us a lot about what D&D thinks becoming a Lich means. But first, why? Why would a powerful wizard, someone who can already reshape reality, who can teleport across continents, who can call down meteors, why would they want this? Time. A human wizard at maximum natural lifespan might have 80 years. That's nothing. The Lich has eternity. There are spells that take decades to research, artifacts that take centuries to create, plans that require watching kingdoms rise and fall. Power. A dead wizard casts no spells, but a Lich wizard still casting, growing stronger, learning more. While rivals age and die, the Lich just keeps going. Fear. Everyone fears death, even powerful wizards, especially powerful wizards who have so much to lose. The Lich has conquered that fear. Death holds no power over them. Obsession. Sometimes a wizard has an enemy that outlives them, a rival they can't defeat, a goal they can't complete. Lichdom is the ultimate, I'm not done yet. So how do you actually do it? The first edition version was vague, very vague. You need to be a high-level evil magic user. You need to perform certain malevolent magical means. What those means are, figure it out yourself. The second edition version from Van Richten's guide was the most detailed we've ever gotten. Step 1. Acquire the materials. Rare herbs, precious metals, gems. Parts of creatures tied to death and undeath. All expensive, all difficult to obtain. Step 2. Craft the phylactery. This takes months. It requires specific enchantments. It must be done in a place of death, a graveyard, a battlefield, a place where many have died. Step 3. Brew the potion. This is the transformation agent. Different sources list different ingredients, but they all include poisons and components tied to undeath. The potion must be brewed during the time the phylactery is crafted. Step 4. The binding ritual. This is where you die. You drink the potion, which kills you. But because the phylactery is complete and the ritual is in progress, your soul transfers to the phylactery instead of passing on. Step 5. The awakening. If everything went right, you rise as a lich. If anything went wrong, you stay dead. Oh, and about things going wrong. Van Richten's guide details what happens when the ritual fails. Simple death, where you just die, becoming a mindless undead instead. Soul trapped in phylactery, but body doesn't rise. Transformation succeeds, but phylactery is flawed. Or you become a lich, but insane. The ritual has something like a 10% failure rate, even when done correctly. That's terrifying when the cost of failure is your eternal soul. The 3rd edition version made it a template with costs, 11th level caster minimum. Craft wondrous item feat, 120,000 gold pieces. Evil alignment. The process still involves creating a phylactery and dying. The mechanics were clear, but the horror was reduced. It felt more like a character build option than a dark bargain. The 5th edition version is deliberately vague, but with important implications. The monster manual says liches embrace undeath and learn the secret of undeath from arcane texts or dark patrons. That word patrons is important. It suggests the process requires outside help, demons, devils, dark gods. You can't just find a spell, you have to make a deal. This brings back the horror. Becoming a lich isn't just a personal choice, it's a transaction, and the other party always collects. There's another element that some sources mention, the sacrifice. Many versions of the lich creation ritual require a death, not just your own death, someone else's, a loved one, a powerful being, an innocent. This serves a practical purpose. The soul energy helps fuel the transformation, and a narrative purpose. It ensures the lich has truly committed evil. Let's talk about what happens after the transformation. You're a lich now. Congratulations. You're immortal, powerful, and different. Van Richten's guide explores this beautifully. The lich doesn't immediately become a cackling villain. The change is gradual. First, you notice small things. Food doesn't taste right. Music doesn't move you. The sun is too bright. Then, bigger things. You can't sleep. Your emotions feel distant. People you cared about seem less important. Eventually, centuries in, you realize you can't remember what caring felt like. You remember that you used to have friends, family, goals beyond power. But those memories feel like stories about someone else. Here's something from Van Richten's guide that I love. The lich believes its mind is unchanged, that it is still the same person who made the choice to embrace undeath. This belief is, without exception, false. The being that awakes after the transformation bears only superficial resemblance to the mortal who began it. The lich thinks they're still them. They're not. They're something that wears their memories like a costume. That's the real horror of lichdom. Not the skeleton body, not the phylactery. The fact that the person who chose this is already dead, killed in the ritual and replaced by something else. Over 50 years, D&D has given us dozens of memorable liches, but a few stand above the rest as true icons of the game. Let's meet them. If there's one lich everyone knows, it's Vecna. Vecna started as a name attached to artifacts. The Hand of Vecna and Eye of Vecna appeared in early D&D as powerful magic items with dark origins. But over time, his story expanded until he became one of D&D's most important figures. In life, Vecna was a human wizard in the world of Orth. His mother was a witch who taught him the dark arts before being executed for her practices. Vecna swore revenge on the world that killed her. He rose to power as a wizard of incredible skill, conquering nations and building an empire, but mortality loomed. So Vecna did what powerful wizards do. He found another way. The details of his transformation are unclear, which is fitting for the god of secrets. But become a lich he did. As a lich, Vecna ruled for centuries. His empire covered much of the Flenis. He was served by his lieutenant Cass, who wielded a sword of Vecna's own making. Then Cass betrayed him. The battle between Vecna and Cass destroyed them both. Cass was flung into a demiplane. Vecna should have been destroyed forever. But all they found was a hand and an eye. Those artifacts became legend. Anyone who attached the hand or eye to their own body gained tremendous power and became a vessel for Vecna's influence. Through his artifacts, Vecna gathered worshippers. Through worshippers, he gathered power, and eventually, through power, he became a god. This is Vecna's arc, mortal wizard to lich, to demigod, to full deity. He's now the god of secrets, undeath, and forbidden knowledge. He has worshippers across multiple worlds, but at his core, Vecna is still the lich who conquered death itself. Every lich who seeks power beyond lichdom walks in his footsteps. If Vecna represents lich ambition, Acererak represents lich cruelty. Acererak first appears in Tomb of Horrors, published in 1978, one of the deadliest D&D modules ever written, and the tomb is his masterpiece. Every trap, every trick, every seemingly empty corridor, all designed by Acererak to torment adventurers. The tomb isn't just dangerous, it's mean. It punishes cleverness. It rewards paranoia, then punishes that too. And at the center of it all, Acererak's skull, waiting. See, Acererak transcended normal lichdom to become a Demilich. His body is gone. Only his skull remains, jeweled and terrible. He doesn't need the phylactery hunt because his phylactery is him, and he's one of the hardest things in D&D to destroy. Acererak returned in 5th edition's Tomb of Annihilation, where we learned his ultimate goal, the Soulmonger, a device that captures the souls of everyone who dies, feeding them to an entity called Atropol. The death toll is massive, entire nations worth of souls consumed. And why? Because Acererak is curious. He wants to see what happens. The suffering is almost incidental to his research. Acererak is the lich as sadist. He doesn't want to rule, ruling is boring. He doesn't want to create, creation is tedious. He wants to destroy, experiment, and watch things suffer. He's possibly the most purely evil entity in D&D, and he's done it for millennia. Not all liches hide in dungeons. Some rule nations. Sastam is the Lich Lord of Thay, the magical nation of the Red Wizards in the Forgotten Realms. Unlike Vecna or Acererak, Sastam is concerned with politics, economics, and power in the traditional sense. Thay is a megacracy ruled by wizards. Sastam is just the most powerful among them. He commands armies, he negotiates treaties, he sends ambassadors to other nations. The fact that he's been dead for centuries is almost incidental. What makes Sastam fascinating is his pragmatism. He's not a cackling villain, he's a politician. He makes deals, he honors agreements when it's convenient. He's patient in ways living creatures can't comprehend. Sastam represents the lich as eternal bureaucrat. He doesn't need to destroy you, he just needs to outlast you. Your grandchildren's grandchildren will still be dealing with Sastam, and by then, he'll have won through simple persistence. Remember when I said Ravenloft made liches tragic? Azalin Rex is the proof. Azalin was a wizard king who sought immortality to continue his conquest. He got it. He became a lich. He was invincible, and then the dark powers took him. Now Azalin rules Darkon, a domain in the demiplane of dread. He has everything: power, territory, time. But he's cursed. He cannot learn new magic. His memory fades. His subjects forget they were ever anything but his, and he can never, ever leave. For a wizard who defined himself by learning, this is hell. Imagine being immortal but frozen. Everything you knew when you became a lich is all you'll ever know. Azalin has spent centuries trying to escape. He's failed every time. And the worst part? The dark powers make sure he knows it. This is the lich as tragic figure. Azalin made a choice. He got what he wanted, and it destroyed everything he thought he was preserving. There are other notable liches worth mentioning. Larlock, the Shadow King, an ancient lich of Faerun, ruler of Warlock's Crypt, so old and powerful that other liches fear him. Kangx, from the Baldur's Gate video game, a Demilich whose body was scattered across multiple locations, one of the hardest fights in the game. Lady Ilmero, Eberron's most infamous lich, rules the Bloodsail Pirates, uses the guise of a living woman to interact with the world. The Lich Queen Vlaakith, not technically a lich, but the undead ruler of the Githyanki, shows how different cultures approach the lich concept. The lich is one of D&D's greatest contributions to fantasy. The concept has spread so far that many people encounter liches without ever knowing their origin. The Lich King from Warcraft might be the most famous lich in modern media. Arthas's fall from Paladin to Death Knight to Lich King mirrors the classic D&D corruption arc. Is the Lich King exactly a D&D lich? Not quite, but the influence is obvious. The soul contained in Frostmourne, the undead army, The corruption of a hero. These are D&D concepts filtered through Blizzard's lens. The Elder Scrolls has its own take on liches, powerful undead mages who appear throughout the series. They're more explicitly tied to necromancy, but the core concept remains: wizard who became undead through dark magic. The Lich appears in Diablo, in Pathfinder, which has the closest relationship to D&D's version, in Magic, The Gathering, in countless indie games and roguelikes, in every RPG that needs an undead wizard boss. In fantasy literature, the Lich archetype appears in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. The Fused share some DNA, in countless fantasy novels and series. In web fiction and amateur fantasy, what D&D created was a trope: the wizard who conquered death at the cost of their humanity. Before D&D, we had Koshé, we had Skeleton Kings, we had Dark Wizards. After D&D, we have a specific thing called a Lich that everyone understands. Undead wizard, immortal through dark magic, soul in an external container, extremely dangerous, often a campaign's final villain. That's D&D's contribution to fantasy. The Lich archetype belongs to everyone now. Why has this concept proven so durable? The fear of death. Everyone understands wanting to live forever. The Lich takes that understandable desire and shows us the cost. The corruption of ambition. The Lich was once a person, a successful, talented, powerful person, and they threw it all away for more power. That's a cautionary tale that resonates. The long view. There's something terrifying about an enemy that doesn't get tired, doesn't get frustrated, doesn't make mistakes from impatience. The Lich has been planning for centuries. What chance do you have? The could have been. Every Lich was once a student, an apprentice, someone's child. What happened? When did they cross the line? Could it have been prevented? The best Liches make you wonder about the road not taken. So here we are, 50 years of the Lich. We started with a skeleton in a robe, a monster with barely a paragraph of description. We end with one of the most complex, terrifying, and iconic creatures in fantasy gaming. What a journey it's been. First edition gave us the foundation, the undead wizard who wouldn't stay dead. Second edition gave us the psychology of the tragic horror of immortality at any cost. Third edition gave us the diversity, a dozen different types of Lich for every story you wanted to tell. Fourth edition gave us the tactics, a Lich that was terrifying to actually fight at the table. Fifth edition brought it all together, the horror, the mechanics, and the dark bargains that make Lichdom meaningful. But through all of that, the core never changed. The Lich is someone who looked at death and said no, who traded their humanity for time, who had such vast ambition that even mortality seemed like a problem to be solved. And in solving it, they became something other than human. That's what makes the Lich so compelling as a villain. Not the power, lots of monsters are powerful. Not the immortality, lots of creatures are immortal. It's the choice. The Lich chose this. The Lich earned this. And somewhere, deep in what passes for their soul, the Lich knows what they sacrificed. They just can't remember why it mattered anymore. In all my years exploring D&D lore, the Lich remains my favorite villain archetype. Not because they're the strongest, gods and demon lords claim that title. Not because they're the scariest, there are things in the far realm that would shatter a Lich's mind. But because they're the most understandable, we've all wanted more time. We've all feared death. We've all imagined what we could accomplish if only we had more years. The Lich answered those questions. And the answer is horror. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Lich lore, you might want to check out my other videos on D&D's undead. Vampires have their own fascinating history. The Death Knight is the Lich's martial counterpart, and if you want to see Lichdom in action, my Vecna series covers the most famous Lich of all. Let me know in the comments, what's your favorite Lich? Have you ever fought one in a campaign? Did you win? And if you're new here, consider subscribing. I do deep dives like this regularly, exploring the lore of Dungeons & Dragons from its earliest days to the present, because in D&D, the past isn't dead. It's plotting against you from a tomb somewhere, waiting for its phylactery to finish regenerating. Thanks for watching.